I still remember the sound of my own heartbeat that night, loud, uneven, desperate, echoing under the polite laughter of our guests. He stood there, smiling like the perfect gentleman, while I sat frozen, pretending his words didn't cut through me like glass. "My stepdaughter thinks she's smarter than the rest of us," he said, raising his glass. "But tell me, Lena, how's that big city dream working out?" Everyone laughed. Even my mother looked down, unable to meet my eyes. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor and escape the shame burning in my chest. But I didn't move. I couldn't. Because I realized something that night: humiliation can break your spirit, or it can build your fire. People think betrayal always comes with lies or cheating. But sometimes, it comes dressed as a father's smile. A smile that hides years of manipulation, control, and silent cruelty. I had stayed quiet for too long, convincing myself that silence meant peace. But peace built on fear isn't peace, it's surrender. When the laughter faded, I looked at him and said quietly, "One day, you'll regret this, Gregory." He smirked. "Don't threaten me, child. Respect your elders." Respect. The very word he used to destroy me. That night, something inside me shifted. I wiped my tears, looked into the mirror, and whispered to myself, "If he wants to play with my dignity in public, I'll destroy his in the same light." Because that night wasn't just about humiliation, it was the beginning of my revenge. From the outside, our family looked perfect, the kind of picture you'd see on holiday cards. My mother, Elaine, always smiling in her pearl necklace. My stepfather, Gregory, shaking hands with neighbors like a local politician. And my stepbrother, Mason, the golden boy everyone adored. Then there was me, Lena Carter, the quiet one at the edge of every family photo, smiling just enough to hide the cracks. When my father passed away, I was 23. My mother remarried Gregory within a year. "He's a good man, Lena," she'd told me, her voice trembling with hope more than conviction. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe I could belong again. At first, Gregory played the role perfectly. The concerned stepfather, offering advice, paying my bills when I struggled, pretending to care about my career. "You're part of this family now," he'd say, smiling that same polished smile he wore in public. But inside our home, everything was about appearances, not feelings. Every dinner felt like a silent competition. Mason would brag about his new projects at work, his father nodding proudly, while my words often went unnoticed. "Lena, could you pass the salt?" Gregory would interrupt whenever I tried to share something meaningful. My mother would give me that helpless look, the one that said, "Please don't start a scene." Still, I tried. I attended family gatherings, brought thoughtful gifts, and smiled through every subtle insult. Aunt Miriam often patted my shoulder, saying, "You should be grateful, dear." Not every man would take responsibility for another man's daughter. Grateful, that word stung every time. Gregory loved playing the hero. At family events, he'd tell stories about how he rescued my mother from loneliness and how even Lena turned out fine. People would nod, laugh, and call him a blessing. I would just sip my drink and count the seconds until I could leave. The truth was, no one noticed how carefully I tried to earn their approval. I worked hard, stayed out of trouble, even joined the family business to prove my worth. But no matter how much effort I gave, Gregory found ways to remind me I didn't belong. When clients praised my designs, he'd smile and say, "She got lucky." When Mason failed at something, he'd say, "We all make mistakes." But when I did, he'd call it ungrateful behavior. My mother, caught between us, always said, "Don't take it personally, Lena. He's just old-fashioned." But it was personal. Every comment chipped away at my confidence, my dignity. I began noticing small things. Mason's sudden promotion despite less experience, Gregory's mysterious calls late at night, and the way my mother avoided questions about money. Something wasn't right, but I didn't know what. One evening, at a small family reunion, Gregory made a toast. "To family," he said, raising his glass. "To loyalty, respect, and knowing your place." The guests clapped. I just stared at him, realizing every word was meant for me. Later that night, as we cleaned up, my mother whispered, "He's under pressure at work. Don't make things harder." I smiled weakly and nodded, but inside, I was crumbling. That night, I stood in my old bedroom, surrounded by childhood memories, and whispered to myself, "I don't belong here anymore." But just as I turned off the light, I heard voices from the living room, Gregory and Mason. Mason said softly, "Does she know?"
Gregory's reply chilled me to the bone. "She won't. Not until it's too late."
I froze, every nerve in my body tightening. They were hiding something that involved me. The conflict didn't explode all at once, it grew quietly, like cracks spreading through glass. By the time I saw it clearly, it was already too late. After that night, the one when I overheard Gregory and Mason whispering, things changed.
They started acting different around me.
Gregory avoided eye contact, Mason smirked whenever I entered the room, and my mother, she seemed nervous, distracted. Then one morning, over breakfast, Gregory made an announcement. "I've decided to transfer a portion of the company shares to Mason," he said casually, slicing into his toast.
My coffee cup froze midway to my lips.
"Wait, shares?"
He didn't even look at me. "Yes.
It's time Mason takes on more responsibility. He's proven himself."
I forced a smile. "And what about me?"
"I've been handling design and marketing for 3 years."
Gregory finally looked up, his eyes sharp. "You've done fine.
But business isn't built on sympathy, Lena."
Sympathy. That word again.
Mason leaned back, smirking. "Don't take it personally, sis. You're creative, not corporate material." My mother reached for my hand under the table, whispering, "Please, not here."
But something in me broke.
"So it doesn't matter how much I contribute?
Just because I'm not his blood."
Gregory's expression turned cold.
"What's your tone?"
"Respect is earned, not demanded." I wanted to scream, to tell him respect was the very thing he'd stolen from me, but I swallowed my words. That week, the house felt heavier. My ideas at work were suddenly under review.
Mason took over meetings I'd built from scratch. Gregory complimented him at every turn. My mother stayed silent. Every time I tried to speak up, I was shut down.
"Lena, don't make this about you." "Lena, he's just trying to help." "Lena, stop being dramatic." The whispers at family gatherings grew louder. "Mason's taking after his father," they'd say proudly. And when I walked by, someone would murmur, "She's lucky to have a roof over her head." Lucky. That word burned deeper than any insult. One afternoon, I found Mason in my office, going through my files. "What are you doing?"
I demanded. He grinned. "Dad asked me to check your reports.
He says you've been overspending."
I snatched the papers from his hands.
"You have no right."
"Relax," he said.
"Dad doesn't trust easily, especially people who aren't family."
My heart dropped.
"I am family."
He leaned closer. "No, Lena.
You're the reminder that we're not perfect." Those words haunted me for days. I started noticing more, the way Gregory took credit for my work in meetings, the way clients who praised me were suddenly told to speak to Mason. Even Aunt Miriam, who once defended me, now looked at me with pity.
Then came the final insult.
At a grand family dinner, with business partners and family friends gathered, Gregory raised his glass. "To my son, Mason, the future of Carter Enterprises."
Applause thundered.
I sat frozen, trying to hide the shaking in my hands. He looked right at me and said, "And to Lena, may she one day find something she's truly good at."
Laughter erupted. I felt my face burn.
My mother stared into her wine, silent.
I stood up, my chair scraping the floor.
"Enough."
The room fell silent.
Gregory's smile didn't waver. "Is there a problem, Lena?"
"Yes," I said, my voice trembling.
"You treat me like I'm invisible, like I'm some unwanted charity case. But I've done everything to earn your respect." He leaned back, his tone calm and cruel. "Then maybe, my dear, you should try harder." I could feel every eye on me, every whisper slicing through my pride. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I turned to my mother.
"You said he was a good man."
"Tell me, Mom, do good men humiliate their daughters to feel powerful?" She froze, and for the first time, I saw guilt flicker in her eyes.
But before she could speak, Gregory slammed his glass down.
"That's enough. Go to your room, Lena, before you embarrass yourself any further." I didn't move. I just looked at him, really looked, and saw fear behind that arrogance.
Something deeper was wrong. Something he didn't want anyone to know. After that dinner, something in the house changed.
The silence wasn't peaceful anymore, it was sharp, like walking barefoot over broken glass.
Gregory barely spoke to me unless it was to correct me.
Mason strutted through the halls like he owned them, and my mother moved like a ghost, pretending everything was fine. The house smelled like expensive candles and secrets. One morning, I came down for breakfast and found Gregory at the table with his laptop open. He didn't even look up when he said, "You'll be handling only basic office reports from now on. Mason will take over your client work." I froze. "What? You can't just—" "I can, and I have," he said, tapping on his keyboard. "Be grateful I'm keeping you on payroll."
Be grateful. That phrase again. My chest tightened. I've worked harder than anyone in that office. You know that. He smirked.
"Then maybe hard work isn't your strength, Lena. Maybe you're just unlucky." I could feel my hands shaking, but I said nothing.
Because in that house, speaking up meant losing even more.
At family gatherings, he began using me as the punchline for his jokes. "Lena tried another one of her creative ideas this week," he'd say with a laugh. "Let's just say numbers aren't her best friend."
People laughed. Some awkwardly. My mother forced a smile.
And every time, I just sat there, nodding, pretending it didn't hurt.
But it did. It hurt every single time.
Even my aunt, who once told me I reminded her of my father, started avoiding me. "You shouldn't challenge Gregory," she whispered once. "He's the head of the family."
Head of the family.
That was the role he loved, controlling everyone under the excuse of tradition. At Mason's birthday party, things got worse. I had spent days helping my mother organize everything: decorations, food, music. I stayed up all night baking Mason's favorite cake, the same one he used to beg me for when we were kids. But when guests arrived, Gregory announced, Mason's girlfriend brought the cake, homemade. Everyone clapped, taking pictures. My cake sat untouched on the counter, forgotten. Tara, my cousin, leaned over and whispered, "You okay?"
I smiled tightly. Fine. But my throat burned. My stomach twisted with a mix of shame and anger.
Later that night, I overheard Gregory talking to Mason again in the backyard. "She's getting too sensitive," he said. "We can't let her ruin our image."
Mason laughed. "Don't worry. She's too weak to fight back."
That word, weak, stuck to my skin like poison. Days turned into weeks, and the disrespect became normal.
Mason started giving me orders at work.
Gregory corrected how I dressed, how I spoke, even how I smiled in front of guests. "You look too serious," he'd whisper. "Try not to embarrass me." One evening, during a charity dinner at the house, Gregory's cruelty reached a new height.
A reporter asked about the family business.
Gregory put an arm around Mason and said proudly, "Everything we've built is because of my son. I taught him everything he knows."
Then the reporter turned to me.
"And what's your role, Lena?" Before I could answer, Gregory chuckled.
"Oh, Lena?
She's creative.
But this is a man's business." Laughter again. My stomach dropped.
For a moment, I saw my mother's face, guilt and fear tangled together, but she said nothing. That night, when the guests left, I confronted her. "Why do you let him treat me like this?" She whispered, "Because I can't lose this family again."
I stared at her.
"You already did, Mom.
You just don't know it yet."
I went to my room, shut the door, and let the tears finally fall.
But somewhere in that pain, something hardened inside me.
I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was angry. Cold, quiet, dangerous anger.
Tara called that night.
"You need to know something," she said. "Gregory isn't who he pretends to be. I found something you should see."
My breath caught.
"What is it?"
She hesitated. "Meet me tomorrow.
And don't tell anyone." As I hung up the phone, I felt the first spark of something dark, not fear, not sadness, but purpose. It was a Friday evening when the final betrayal unfolded, the kind that doesn't come with shouting, but with a silence so heavy it makes your heart stop. Tara had asked me to meet her that afternoon at a cafe near her office. I arrived early, still shaken from Gregory's constant humiliations, hoping for something, anything, that would make sense of it all. She slid a brown envelope across the table, her expression grave. "Before you open it," she said softly, "promise me you'll be careful." Inside were photocopies of documents, bank statements, company records, and emails. Gregory's signature was on all of them. It didn't take long for me to understand. He had been funneling company funds into a private account, under Mason's name. My name, meanwhile, had been quietly removed from the company register.
I felt my throat close. "He's cutting me out," I whispered. Tara nodded. "Completely."
"And he's making it look like you resigned, voluntarily."
My hands trembled.
Everything I had built, every ounce of effort, erased with a forged signature. When I got home that night, I found them all in the living room: Gregory, Mason, my mother, and Aunt Miriam, sitting like they were waiting for me. Gregory smiled, that fake charm stretched across his face.
"Ah, Lena. Perfect timing."
"We were just talking about you."
I felt my stomach drop.
"About what?"
He stood up and handed me a folder.
"Your resignation papers."
"It's time you move on, dear."
My eyes darted over the papers. My name, my supposed signature, my letter of resignation.
"This isn't mine," I said, my voice trembling.
Gregory chuckled. "Lena, don't embarrass yourself.
You emailed this weeks ago."
"Perhaps you've forgotten." "I didn't," I said, louder this time. "You forged this." My mother flinched, looking between us, but said nothing. Mason folded his arms, smirking. "Maybe you should take a break, Lena. You've been emotional lately."
My voice cracked.
"You're stealing from the company and framing me for walking away."
Gregory's smile vanished. He stepped closer, his voice low and venomous.
"Careful, girl. Words like that can destroy reputations, and you have none left to lose."
I felt my heart hammering against my ribs.
"Why are you doing this to me?"
He looked me dead in the eye. "Because you were never part of this family. You're just your father's shadow."
"And it's time that shadow disappeared." I looked at my mother, the woman who had once sworn she'd protect me from everything. "Mom, please, tell him this isn't right."
Her lips trembled. She couldn't meet my gaze.
"Maybe it's best if you step away for a while, Lena.
Just until things calm down." That broke me.
Not his words, hers. Because when your own mother turns her silence into a weapon, you realize you're truly alone.
I packed my things that night.
As I walked out of the house, Gregory called after me, his voice calm and cruel. "Take care, Lena. And remember, you left. No one pushed you." I turned around, tears streaking down my face. "You can take everything from me, Gregory, but one day, you'll lose something money can't buy."
He smirked. "Respect? You already lost that."
The door shut behind me, and for the first time, the house didn't feel like home, it felt like a battlefield I'd escaped from.
Days passed in a blur.
I stayed at Tara's apartment, barely sleeping. The gossip spread fast. Gregory told people I'd left the company after personal issues. Mason joked at parties that I'd burned out.
And my mother never called.
There were moments when I almost gave up, moments when the humiliation felt unbearable. I'd stare at my reflection, wondering if maybe I was everything they said I was: ungrateful, emotional, weak. But then I'd hear Gregory's voice echo in my head, that smug tone, that word respect twisted into a weapon, and the shame turned into fire. One evening, I sat at Tara's dining table, staring at the evidence again. She said quietly, "We can expose him, Lena. I can help you."
I shook my head. "Not yet. Not until I'm ready." She looked at me curiously.
"What are you planning?" I looked up, my voice calm, too calm.
"He took my dignity in front of others. I'll take his in the same way."
For a long time, I had believed that revenge was for the bitter, not the broken. But pain has a way of sharpening you, turning your wounds into weapons. And as much as I hated admitting it, the man who destroyed my peace had also taught me how to fight. That night, I wrote down everything: the documents, the lies, the humiliation, and tucked it all into a folder labeled Truth. I didn't know how yet, but I knew when the moment came, I'd be ready to strike. As I looked out the window, the city lights flickering below, I whispered to myself, he wanted me invisible. Now he'll see me clearer than ever.
I wasn't the broken daughter anymore.
I was the storm he created, and soon, I'd bring it home. The first thing I did was breathe. Real, slow breaths, the kind that unknots the throat and clears the head. For weeks I'd been a wound in motion, raw, scattered, pulled by shame and grief. Then I decided to stop being the wound. I would become the hand that healed, and the hand that struck back. I moved into Tara's apartment with 2 suitcases and a folder labeled Truth. Sitting at her kitchen table, I laid everything out like pieces of a map: bank statements, email chains, forged signatures, photographs, voicemail clips. Each piece was a shard of the life they tried to erase. Each piece felt personal, like a slice of my dignity. I touched them one by one and felt my anger focus into something else: purpose. "You don't have to do this alone," Tara said, pulling a chair close. "We can go to the paper. We can give this to the lawyer I know." I met her eyes. If I rush to the paper, he buries it with money or threats. If I go to a lawyer, he'll make it legalese and drag it out. I want people to see him fall as he humiliated me, in the light I was humiliated under. Tara hesitated. "So what then?" I heard myself say it aloud and tasted the danger on my tongue. "I want him exposed. Publicly. Clean. No room for his bought apologies." That was when the plan began to take shape: messy, risky, and intimate. It would be 3 parts. First, proof. Not rumors, not hearsay. I needed irrefutable evidence that tied Gregory to the money, to the fake resignations, to Mason's sudden windfall. Tara helped me dig deeper. We traced transfers, found metadata on emails, and recovered deleted files with the help of Dean, an old friend who owed me a favor. Dean's calm competence steadied me. He whispered, "We'll make a chain of custody. No one can dismiss this." Hearing it said aloud made the danger real and necessary. Second, allies. I couldn't rely on my mother to choose truth. She already chose comfort. But there were other people who cared about what was real. Tara would be my public voice. Dean would secure the technical traces. Mrs. Thompson, the family friend who'd once silently supported me, allowed me to meet with her under the pretense of tea and listened, eyes wide with disbelief. "I always wondered," she said. "He seemed too perfect." She promised to be present when truth came out. Quiet supporters matter. Their presence makes an accusation harder to gaslight. Third, timing and theater. Gregory loved the stage, his charity galas, his family announcements, the family thank yous in front of crowds. That arrogance was my weapon. I booked nothing flashy. Instead, I set a quiet trap, a small family reconciliation dinner he'd likely accept because it fed his need to look magnanimous. I told my mother I wanted to talk. She said yes, relieved to imagine peace. Gregory would come, certain of applause. But I also prepared legal redundancy. Dean and I spoke to a lawyer anonymously, not to file immediately, but to prepare a demand package and a timeline that could be sent to press and authorities simultaneously. If Gregory tried to bury us in courtroom fog, the moment would already be public. The plan had teeth, documents handed out at the table, a recording played aloud, and an electronic release sent to a local journalist at the same second. No chance to shred, no time to spin. Emotion wanted to take over, to stand in the middle of the room and shout every wound. Strategy told me to be quiet, to let the evidence speak with cold precision. Strategy 1. The nights were long. I practiced my voice in the mirror until it was steady, not pleading victim, but a calm reckoning. I slept in bursts. I walked through the city, letting the lights and noise sharpen my resolve. I wrote and rewrote what I would say until every word carried only what needed to be carried. There were moments of doubt. What if my mother finally turned on me? What if Gregory bought silence from everyone who mattered? What if, after all this, I was still the only one left standing with scars and no justice? But the anger had shifted. It wasn't about revenge for its own sake anymore. It was about respect, the one he'd stolen in front of everyone. It was about a truth that had to be exposed so it couldn't be used against anyone else. The folder labeled Truth sat heavy in my bag the night I drove home to the house for the first time since I left. I felt the weight of it against my thigh like a promise. I parked 2 blocks away, walked the last stretch, and stood at their front door long enough to memorize the familiar creak. My hand hovered over the bell. Inside, a family practiced their performances. Outside, I had rehearsed mine. I pressed the bell. My heart pounded, not with fear this time, but with a steady, dangerous calm. The night of the dinner arrived with the kind of calm that only exists before a storm. The house was lit in gold, chandeliers glowing, silverware polished to perfection, and Gregory Carter smiling as if the universe still revolved around him. I stood at the entrance, every breath measured, every heartbeat rehearsed. My mother greeted me nervously, her pearl necklace trembling slightly against her skin. "Lena," she whispered, "thank you for coming." Let's just keep things peaceful tonight, okay?
Of course, Mom, I said softly. Peaceful. Until it's not. Gregory's voice boomed from the dining room.
Ah, the prodigal daughter returns.
Come in, Lena.
Let's finally put this nonsense behind us.
His words slid through me like oil. He wanted a scene, but this time, I was ready.
Everyone was there, Mason with his smug grin, Aunt Miriam clutching her wine glass, Mrs. Thompson seated near the end of the table, and a few of Gregory's business friends who adored his success story. The perfect audience.
We sat down. Plates clinked. Laughter floated, hollow, rehearsed. I waited for my moment. Gregory cleared his throat.
Before we begin, I'd like to make a small announcement. He stood, raising his glass. Family is everything. Forgiveness, respect, and understanding. That's what keeps us together. Isn't that right, Lena?
I smiled, calm and polite.
Absolutely, Gregory. Especially when everyone plays their part truthfully. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Then, I reached for the small remote hidden under the table. One quiet click, and the hidden speakers I'd set earlier came alive.
Gregory's own voice filled the room.
Transfer the money under Mason's name. Make sure Lena's signature looks convincing.
The room froze.
Mason's fork clattered against his plate. My mother's face drained of color. Aunt Miriam gasped. Gregory, what is this?
Gregory's charm cracked. This is ridiculous.
Some kind of edited recording. Edited. I interrupted, sliding the folder of documents across the table. Then maybe you can explain the bank transfers, the forged resignation, and the company shares you stole under my name. Whispers erupted around the table. Mrs. Thompson stood, her voice shaking. Gregory, I vouched for you to half this town. Is this true?
Gregory's face twisted.
You don't understand. She's twisting everything. I stood, my hands steady now. I'm twisting nothing. You humiliated me in this room. You called me ungrateful, emotional, weak. But the only weakness here was yours, hiding behind lies. My mother covered her mouth, tears streaming down. Gregory, please, tell me this isn't real.
He slammed his hand on the table.
Enough. I built this family.
No, I said quietly. You built a mask. And it just fell.
At that moment, Tara, who had been filming discreetly near the doorway, stepped forward. This video will go public tonight if you try to deny it. Mason stood abruptly. Dad, you said she'd never find out.
Gregory turned on him.
Shut up. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Everyone's eyes shifted, from father to son, from pride to panic. Then, my mother rose slowly. Her voice trembled, but her words were sharp. Get out, Gregory. I won't let you destroy another daughter's life with your greed. He turned toward her, stunned. Elaine.
Don't, she snapped.
Not another word.
Gregory's face turned red. You think you can do this to me? You'll regret.
I stepped closer, my voice low but unshakable. You already made me regret enough. This is just balance.
The reporters Tara had discreetly invited outside began knocking on the front door. The sound echoed through the house like judgment itself.
Gregory looked around the table, realizing the walls were closing in, his perfect empire collapsing. He muttered, You think you've won, Lena?
I met his gaze. No.
I just stopped losing.
He stormed out, shoving past the reporters outside.
Flashbulbs burst as questions flew. Mr. Carter, do you deny the fraud? Is it true you forged your stepdaughter's resignation?
Inside, silence remained. Mason sank into his chair, speechless. My mother wept softly.
Aunt Miriam whispered, I never thought I'd live to see this day. I looked around that glittering table, the same one where I'd once been mocked and silenced, and for the first time, I felt no shame, no fear, no need for their approval. Only clarity. I turned to my mother, my voice gentle now.
Mom, I'm sorry it had to be this way.
But he left me no choice. She nodded through her tears. No, Lena, he left us no choice. Outside, the storm had finally broken. Thunder rumbled in the distance as the flashlights faded into the night. The man who humiliated me in front of the world was finally exposed before it, and in that silence after the storm, I heard something I hadn't heard in years, my own voice, steady and free. The night after the confrontation, the house that once rang with Gregory's laughter stood eerily quiet.
No raised voices. No clinking glasses.
Just the hollow echo of a family stripped bare of its illusions. By morning, the story had already made the rounds. Local news channels ran headlines about the Carter family scandal. Reporters waited outside the gates, and Gregory's name, once whispered with respect, was now tied to words like fraud, forgery, and disgrace. He tried to deny everything, of course. But the recordings, the documents, and the witnesses left no room for his charm to twist the truth. Within days, his reputation crumbled, partners withdrew, investors pulled out, and even Mason disappeared from the public eye. The empire that had made him untouchable was now dust in his hands. I watched from afar, not with glee, but with a strange, quiet sadness. Because the truth is, revenge doesn't heal you, it simply clears the space for healing to begin. My mother called me 2 weeks later. Her voice was smaller, softer. "He's gone, Lena," she said. "He left the house, the business, everything. I don't even know where."
I didn't ask. I didn't need to. Some disappearances are their own kind of justice.
When I returned home to collect the last of my things, the house looked smaller. The grand portraits, the polished staircase, all the symbols of control and pretense, seemed meaningless now. My mother met me at the doorway, her eyes red-rimmed but clearer than I'd seen in years.
"I should have spoken sooner," she said quietly. "I knew something was wrong.
I was just afraid of losing another husband."
I touched her hand.
"You didn't lose him, Mom. He lost himself." We stood there for a long time, surrounded by silence that finally felt peaceful. She asked if I'd move back home, but I smiled and shook my head. "I need to build something that's mine, clean, honest, without fear." She nodded, tears glinting under the morning light. "Then I hope you build something beautiful." And I did. Over the next few months, I poured everything, my pain, my lessons, my strength, into creating my own design firm. It wasn't grand or luxurious at first, but it was mine. Tara became my partner. Dean helped with the legal work. Mrs. Thompson connected me with clients who still believed in integrity. Slowly, quietly, life began again. One day, while walking into our small office, I caught sight of my reflection in the glass door, no longer the woman who flinched at her stepfather's voice, but someone who had earned her peace the hard way. That evening, Tara asked me, "Do you ever regret exposing him? Maybe there was another way."
I smiled faintly.
"Regret?
No. Pain? Yes.
But pain isn't something to regret, it's something you outgrow." She looked at me thoughtfully, then said, "He tried to destroy your respect."
I nodded.
"And all he did was remind me what it truly means." Weeks later, my mother visited the new office. She carried a small framed photo, my father holding me when I was a little girl.
She set it on my desk.
"He'd be proud of you," she said softly.
I swallowed hard.
"I hope so. I finally understand what he meant when he said dignity is the only inheritance that can't be stolen." We sat together in silence for a while, the sunset spilling gold across the room.
For the first time, silence didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like peace.
Outside, life moved on. New clients, new projects, laughter echoing through the small studio. And every now and then, when I caught my mother smiling again, I knew something had truly changed. Not just for me, but for all of us who'd once lived under Gregory's shadow. He had taken everything he could, my place in the family, my career, my pride. But in the end, the truth took more from him than I ever could. Because the truth doesn't need revenge. It carries its own power, steady and unstoppable. As I locked up that night, the city lights shimmered like quiet witnesses to everything I had survived. I whispered to myself, almost like a prayer.
Respect isn't something others can give or take.
It's what's left when everything else is gone. And with that, I walked away from the past, not broken, not bitter, but free.